In the great state of Texas, there's no doubt that there's an alliance of energy producers, and we fight strong every day to continue to produce oil and gas in the great state here. I'll talk about that and much more on this episode of The Crude Truth.
In 1901, at Spindletop Hill near Beaumont, the future of Texas changed dramatically as, like a fountain of fortune, thousands of barrels of oil burst from the earth towards the sky. Soon, Detroit would be cranking out Model Ts by the millions, and America was on the move, thanks to the black gold being produced in Texas. Now, more than a century later, the vehicles are different, but nothing else has truly changed. Sure, there may be many other alternative energy sources like wind and solar and electric. But let's be honest, America depends on oil and entrepreneurs, and if the USA is truly going to be independent, it has to know the crude truth.
This episode of The Crude Truth is brought to you by Oil and Gas Workers Association, Sandstone Group, Air Compressor Solutions, Basin Fluids, and the Fuel Pros.
Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whenever it is that you're watching or listening to this awesome show, The Crude Truth. Welcome back to another great episode. Today, once again, I probably say this all the time. I am excited. I am overjoyed to have the guest that I have on today. Today is a guy that has been paving the way in the oil and gas industry, fighting for us for over a decade. My guest today is the president of the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers, Jason Modglin. Jason, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much for having me on and inviting me up to Fort Worth.
Oh, well, hey, thank you for coming. I know you've been partying down there in Austin for the last week. And so thank you so much for coming up and spreading the good word about the Texas Alliance.
It's always nice to have the Texas Capitol in your rearview mirror headed out of there. And so this was a good opportunity to get up here and talk about some of the things that are coming in the session and what we see at the Alliance.
Well, and that's why I wanted to bring you on and invite you on, was to really kind of talk about the Alliance and, more importantly, also talk about you and all the great things that you're up to, but also talk about the state session. So first and foremost, did I say your last name right?
It's Modglin.
Modglin.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
And so it's basically like it's you sound it out.
Yes. There's not too many of us, and we all kind of pronounce it the same way. So, but I don't know the origin or some of those interesting things, family origin. But it's a unique name, and so it kind of stands out.
Well, okay. Well, no, it is very unique, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I like having unique names myself. I think mine is pretty unique. But I just want to. One thing that's my rule is I always like to get people's names right. So it's not Modglin. And so I don't know if there's anybody else out there that's like that, but so that's how you say Jason's last name, Modglin. And but Jason, one thing that I don't know how many people may not know about you is you've been fighting the good fight there in Austin for almost the last 20 years, not only in the energy, but really in the oil and gas sector since day one of your career. So I want to kind of talk about that and your background a little bit.
Well, you're way too kind. My journey to oil and gas really started in 2015 when my boss at the time, a state representative out of the San Angelo area, became House Energy Resources Chairman. Quite suddenly, we didn't expect that to be the case. He had been working on budget issues, and so I was very familiar with the Railroad Commission at the time. But really, that was the extent of my experience. But then in 2015, one of the issues was Denton and kind of city regulation of oil and gas production, and so was thrust into trying to figure out, is this where we want to go? Do we want to cede regulation from the Railroad Commission and the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality to thousands of cities spread across Texas? And the answer was emphatically no. And so the legislature had to step up and craft a policy that was not overbearing or burdensome to cities and orderly development, but actually protected private property rights, protected those mineral rights, and make sure that we can continue to produce oil and gas in suburban and urban settings.
Right. If I remember correctly, I actually that's where I graduated from, with North Texas, way back in 2008, and I'm a TCU fan by marriage. My wife went there. Her dad went there. Her mother went there, and her brother went there. So
Still a great football program.
It still is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I'll say this. I don't know who. I didn't hear a lot of arguing about the Final Four teams. Like, everybody felt like those were the 4 teams that needed to be
That's
there.
right.
And I'm not an OU fan. Okay. I have several good friends that have gone there for great master's programs in energy. They have great programs. But I always liked watching them get beat by those SEC teams. And I'm not a sports, analyst or anything, but I think that game unfortunately showed how much further ahead the SEC is than every other single conference out there.
They're pretty good.
And,
and maybe the start of a new dynasty there in the SEC.
We'll see. I mean, Georgia, I mean, they were bigger. I mean, and I get an opportunity. My father-in-law has season tickets, so I get to go to the first games, against like the small teams, and that's what it almost looked like, that they were playing just giants, which was like, if you get a Tarleton against TCU, or what's the other? That's the Lumberjacks.
SFA.
Yeah. They go in there and they play, and there's a size difference. Well, that's what I saw on TV.
Right.
It's like, man, these guys know. And but hey, they had a great year, and I don't think they're done. I don't think TCU's going to be gone. And with your alma mater, UT, if I'm correct, they're headed to the SEC. So I think it kind of opens the door for TCU there more, and so we'll see.
For sure.
But anyway, getting back to it, I remember, if I'm correct, getting back to Denton outlawed fracking.
They did.
Is that correct? Yeah, in 2013 or 12 or 14?
It would have been 2014.
Yeah.
So it was a city ordinance that was proposed by citizens there. The city council, I think, rightly looked at it and voted it down. And then there was a local referendum, and they reimposed the ordinance, which basically banned hydraulic fracturing within city limits and the extraterritorial jurisdiction. And as you know, with shale development, that's how you produce those minerals. And so effectively the city was foreclosing and condemning all of those property rights. And so the General Land Office at the time sued. Brand new Commissioner George P. Bush sued the city. And you had the legislature really saying, we've got to address this issue. And cities had been dealing with that issue for a long time. The city of College Station and Bryan had dealt with those issues with the Austin Chalk development in the 80s. And so there had been a track record for how to work through orderly development, but didn't really throw all that out. And you had cities across the state really decide, okay, now we're going to reinsert ourselves into oil and gas development. So the legislature had to take action, and that bill passed overwhelmingly, super majorities, both Republicans and Democrats, saying we need to make sure that jurisdiction lies with the Railroad Commission of Texas, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. Those are the appropriate places for oil and gas development and waste streams, and not cities curtailing that ability to produce those minerals.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a lot, because they don't know exactly what all goes into producing an oil and gas well. And there's just so much that goes into that, from the minerals to the land commissioner, George P. Bush, when he was there, to the Railroad Commission. And that in 2015, you said that's when you started working with the energy policy group. Was that when you also started with the Railroad Commission, or had you already been doing work with the Railroad Commission?
Moved to the Railroad Commission at the end of, let me backtrack a little bit. I guess it would have been 2018, really the start of 2019. Was there for a couple of years working for Commissioner Christy Craddock, now the chairman of the commission, and a pivotal time at the Railroad Commission. One, in trying to get more resources for their IT development, and as you know and have experienced with that system. 20 years ago, I mean, it was a mainframe dot matrix. There was times when it would be public time and then Railroad Commission time, and you had to log in at particular times of the day just to access the database, which is crazy.
You know what? It's that database, and I think there's a reason why companies like Inveris and them make
absolutely
bukus of money, because they're able to get in there, pull it out, and make it more user friendly. I joke about it with my dad all the time, because you talk about A-frame and this and that, and I don't know if you know, but that's how we got our start in the 80s. And I say we, not me, but my dad in the oil and gas was by writing custom oil and gas software for a lot of the families here downtown Fort Worth. But he could understand and rock and groove in the 90s and in the early 2000s with the oil and gas website, the Railroad Commission. I'm like, so I just laughed with him. Goes, because of all the old stuff that that you're able to move. He goes, oh, I like it. I don't know why nobody else does. And I'm like, yeah, it is. I think they used the same people to create that did the healthcare back. I joke with that, because that was a bust. But
it's gotten better, right?
Way better, way better. I'm sorry.
Better,
yes, it really has.
And so a lot of that investment, really, a big chunk was in 2019, and the legislature recognizing that the commission needed those resources. Really, thanks to the three commissioners that are there right now, really advocating for the agency, making sure they've got the employees that they need, but also kind of the resources behind the scenes to make sure that those processes move quickly. If the state is sitting on a drilling permit for a week, 2 weeks, you potentially chase away that capital investment. And
Absolutely.
So now it's a day or under sometimes to really make sure that they're doing all their checks, but that it can be processed efficiently.
And that is something that we've noticed. Pecos, we've been around since 2011 as a company. And that process has gotten, just in that time frame, so much quicker, and that is something. But I wanted to dive into your background, because then that leads you now to where you're at, and I just want people to know that's like your background is. I mean, we couldn't have a better person that is now the president of the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers. And I say now, you've been president for over
about 3 years now.
Thought,
3 years here in June, and it worked a lot with the Alliance. Over the years. I said I started in 2015 with oil and gas issues, but had worked with the Alliance back to 2005.
Thank you. Yeah.
Had been around the legislature, and they had been advocating there. The Alliance came together in the year 2000, but it was basically two organizations coming together prior to that. So 1930, the North Texas Oil and Gas Association was founded, and then in 1931, the West Central Texas Oil and Gas Association was founded, and these two mid-con organizations advocated for their industry and their interest in those producers in those communities. And so one was based in Abilene and one was based in Wichita Falls. And really, we still have phenomenal members in those areas. And the Alliance has really been an effective organization for not only representing smaller independent producers, but really those family businesses that are rooted in their community. Exactly what you have and your dad have. Of just you live here, you work here, you want to see that be able to be passed on to the next generation. And so that's kind of what's in the back of our mind all the time. Is yes, we represent some large publicly traded companies as well. But when I ask you for membership, I'm taking from your kid, I'm taking from you and the family. And so we got to do our best to live up to that, work just as hard, try to work just as hard as you're working to make sure that your interests are represented in Austin and Washington, D.C.
And I'm glad you brought that up because that is one thing with your group. First of all, I got to do a shout out to Wichita Falls. That's where a lot of our production is, and we've got well, not us, but there's wells out there that have been producing for over 100 years.
Oh, absolutely.
And then you talk about, we live here, we work here. We do our best to get the guys that are there in the small towns of Holiday or Archer, Burton Burnett, and it's like, hey, y'all know the area, y'all come work, and we try our best to get the people of the community to be involved. And what are we doing right now with the way costs are? We're pumping 150 to 200,000 into a community just per well. We're drilling shallower stuff right now.
That's great.
With the way the costs are. But that's for everybody. Not only in our industry, but across the board. But getting back to it, when you mentioned, hey, you're fighting for the little guys, just like the big guys, if somebody wants to join the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers, what is it that you guys are like, what is it that you're fighting for us and standing for?
Yeah, absolutely. TexasAlliance.org is our website. And so we work in both Austin and Washington, D.C., advocating for smart regulatory policy, smart tax policy that will allow the oil and gas industry to flourish here in Texas. And we think such a critical part of that is smaller independent producers, just simply from them being rooted here. But then also that's your workforce. That's really who is maintaining and working these wells. That's your knowledge base. And then the community aspect of it, just the investment in the local community is so critical. We kind of divide our focus at the Alliance into three particular buckets. So policy area, and that keeps us busy on the kind of those two fronts. Economics, and so we've got Carr Ingham, a petroleum economist that does a Texas Petro Index for us every month, and then does some semi-annual analysis as well. And then communications. And so communications is in part coming to see you, coming to see groups across the state, but then also being very active on social media and Twitter and LinkedIn and YouTube, trying to get the message out that there's very positive things happening in oil and gas, particularly here in Texas. And we need to be proud of that. We need to advocate for it. And so just really happy to see what you're working on. And it's so critical to have more voices in this space.
Thank you for that. But no, we do need to get the word out. It's like we're doing and I say we, the oil and gas industry is doing so many great things for everybody in America. We're not looking if you're left, if you're right. It's like, hey, we want to produce as much oil as we can so we can get the price down of gasoline. It's like, and everybody should know that, it's a supply and demand. So we know that if we're going to produce more, guess what? Our price does going to come down. But it's like, hey, we want to get back to a place where we can help inflation. And don't even get me started on that, oxymoron, which here he blamed the oil and gas industry for inflation. It's like, well, if you're going to blame us, then let us produce more to bring down that price.
That's right.
So we're not going to get into that. But another example of us really trying to get the word out is, I want to do a shout out to Exxon. I did a deal to them the other day, and because they're about to open up an addition to a refinery in Beaumont or Port Arthur?
In Beaumont, yeah, Beaumont. The blade facility, right?
Yes,
yeah.
And that's a big deal because they are adding to an existing facility. However, we can't get permits to drill new, to build a new refinery, but we can add on, and the size that they've added is basically a brand new refinery.
That's right.
So that's something that Exxon should be doing on their own, is getting the positive word out there. And but I know you guys have talked about it, and that's what we need to be doing. And that's another great thing that you guys, again, are doing, is getting the positive word out there on all the great things that the oil and gas industry is bringing.
Yeah, we focus on downstream, but certainly, we focus on upstream, but we could geek out on downstream because that facility is really going to be primed for light sweet crude coming out of the Permian Basin. And unfortunately, you had another facility just down the road from there is due to close this year, the Lyondell facility, which is about the same size. It was 250 250,000 barrels a day.
I did not know that.
But that input was heavier crude. So they're taking Venezuela, they're taking Saudi Arabia. And so the Exxon facility will really be able to refine West Texas and Texas crude, which is phenomenal and really something that we need from our refineries is really start investing in the types of technologies like the blade facility that will be able to be more self-sufficient with the production that we have here in the United States rather than needing to constantly trade barrels around the world to make sure that we can refine it here.
And I think that's going to be my hook for today's episode on the Crude Truth is that the majority of our refineries can handle that ugly, nasty oil that comes from places like Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, and that we have that great sweet crude. Like we have the best oil in the world. And unfortunately, a lot of our refineries cannot handle that. I'm not a technical guy, but they don't handle all that kind of oil. So this, again, is a major win. And it also truly gets us closer to energy independence. Definitely helps out with energy security, bar none, but
for sure.
Also helps us with energy independence, getting down the road one day to be there again.
That's right. And there's an environmental benefit to it. The Permian Basin and the Gulf of Mexico are the lowest emitting areas for production. Yeah. And so if the focus for you as an environmentalist is to have the cleanest burning fuel, then that's what you want. You want to promote these types of investments in domestic oil and gas production. So we've got a little bit of everything. I mean, we can talk about jobs, we can talk about the economics, but then we can also talk about the advantages that domestic production has on the environment. And then one last plug is labor standards. I mean, we have the highest labor standards in the world coupled with our environmental standards.
Absolutely.
And when you compare oil and gas against batteries and heavy refining and just some of these metals and things of that nature that are being mined in Africa and China and these places, I mean, that have none of those controls, no environmental or labor standards. It's just shocking. So that we get out there and kind of tussle and put the bumper sticker out and have fun.
Speaking of bumper sticker, this is it right here. Just to show people right here. Texas Alliance Energy Producers, come and take it. So this is an awesome bumper sticker. So when you become a member, you get one of these also that you can put on your bumper. It's still a good thing to put them on your bumper these days. Even though bumpers, I don't know, man, most vehicles nowadays are like getting rid of bumpers. Like on my pickup truck, y'all expect it to be chrome, but it's pert near like that Corvette back nowadays. And I'm like, well, how are you going to?
We're trying to bring, the bumper stickers back at Permian Basin Petroleum Association. They've got some good ones right now with Midland over Moscow, and so we're having fun with those.
I like it. Bringing back the bumper stickers. I love it. They're fun. I mean, it's something good, and it's better than all the good Trumper stuff that's out there right now. Let's go with Midland over Moscow, and I definitely like to come and take it with the pump jack on there. So, okay, here we are, Texas Alliance of Energy Producers. We are now in a state legislative session. They are going at it every day. What are some of the issues that you are looking out at and fighting for? Because y'all do have teams out there in Austin fighting for us every day.
Yeah. So they are flush with cash right now, and thanks in large part to the oil and gas industry. There were some $10 billion paid in severance taxes this last year, which is just truly a phenomenal number. The highest three peaks that happened prior to that, it only got up to $5 billion a year, and on average, Comptroller Hager says it's a $3 billion average on oil and gas severance tax collection. So a lot of money coming into the state government. One of the other trade associations in the state, Texas Oil and Gas Association, put out a report this week that $24.7 billion were paid into state coffers alone by the oil and gas industry this year. In terms of sales tax and property tax and royalties. So a lot of the money that they're sitting on right now is directly from the oil and gas industry. And we want to see them put it to good use. I think one part is some tax relief, and certainly we all need that in the form of some property tax relief. And I think they're going to champion quite a bit of that this session. but also investing in some kind of core infrastructure needs that we have in this state. And so maybe water will be a key focus for them. Several years ago, they took half of the severance tax dollars that flow into the state and they put it into highways. So for the last nearly 10 years, the state has put severance tax dollars directly into highway fund development and maintenance. And so really, the new bridge in town might be a direct result of that oil and gas pump down the road.
And the funny part of when you talk about new highways, it does take petroleum products to make those highways. So that's just an oxymoron where they want to build up the infrastructure but get rid of oil and gas. And but no, you talked about the severance tax with $10 billion. If I'm correct, and I might not be, so people can fact check me, but here in Texas, the severance tax for oil is 4.5%.
Yep.
And again, I say that because I look at that stuff, and that's a big number, $10 billion out of and that's just out of the severance tax that you talked about. So that's why I wanted to highlight that. Now, of course, hey, I'm an American taxpayer, so this 4.5% is still too much, but it's really not a big number. And yet, look what it generated is at $10 billion, and then you talked about the $24 billion, and all of this money is going towards, like you said, the schools, the roads, and that's big. And and you're here fighting for the oil and gas industry that is over a third of this great state's economy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a phenomenal impact that we really track those upstream workers. And so just under 200,000 Texans get up every day and go to work in producing oil and gas. And then you have about another 300,000 that are moving it around the state, refining it and marketing it. So nearly 500,000 people directly involved in the oil and gas industry and punching well beyond our weight in terms of salaries, but then also economic impact. And it's the feedstock that goes into everything. So agriculture, our food, our refining, our petrochemicals, medicines, it all is dependent upon oil and gas. And so, I was doing a panel the other day, and the first question from the audience was, isn't oil and gas going away? And it's like, absolutely not. But the last place that we want to keep pumping is here in Texas because of all the advantages that we have in Texas. And so even if I'll concede maybe one day there will be reduced demand, the last place you still want to get it out of is Texas.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right about that. And, God bless the great state of Texas. I know you're from the Houston area, and I'm from the Fort Worth area. So we're Texas born boys, and there ain't a darn thing wrong with that.
That's right.
I won't apologize. I want to also highlight that you mentioned that you guys get out there, whether it's social media, whether you're on panels, which if anybody's ever out there, I'm looking right into my camera here, and you see that Jason Modglin is on a panel, get a ticket and go watch and listen to him speak first and foremost. But y'all also have big functions that y'all do, and I'm going to butcher the name of it, but y'all did one, I think it was in September. I was there. And it was at the Hotel Drover, that brand new hotel that may or may not be California people. But but hey, you know what? The Fort Worth stockyards are looking awesome. Okay?
They look great.
And but you had Brian Sheffield speaking, Double Eagle,
Cody Campbell. We had Case Van Hoff.
Yes.
We had Alex Epstein.
That's the other big one. And Wayne Christian.
Commissioner Christian came out. We had a fantastic day. Sean Strawbridge from Port of Corpus Christi.
Yes.
Really just some phenomenal speakers. Ann Bradbury from American Exploration.
And she's from up north.
She's from D.C.
So she came down for that.
So she came in and really had a fantastic time. Thanks for coming to join us there in September at the Drover. And we've done some great public events. We've done webinars and kind of the online presence, and then social media, and then I go and speak to Rotaries and Kiwanis clubs and things of that nature. That just trying to spread the good word.
No, and that's what you're doing, and that's why I wanted to mention that, because that's something that I don't even know if y'all have it on the calendar yet for this year, 2023, but people need to be on the lookout for it because you can grab a lot of information. And I think that's what really sets y'all apart is the amount of knowledge, the amount of backing, the insight that you guys have. And they're at the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers. So thank you guys for what y'all do, Jason. I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you.
And speaking of insight, I think you're sharing your insight right now with that insider David Blackman on a weekly basis. In fact, I think you were just on his show here recently, the Energy Question, right?
I was about half an hour ago at your great facilities here, which are truly phenomenal. But
thank you.
Yes, have a great time with David, and he's roped me into a kind of weekly podcast right now.
Yes,
recapping the Texas legislature and what happened there, and so we have a lot of fun together.
Well, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to highlight that for a minute, just because how great is that you guys are spending the time to really recap the week. You have David was a lobbyist for several years, and you being right there next to the Capitol, have such great insight, you two do, and what goes on during the week, and you actually can explain it in a way that's not engineer talk is the best thing to put. My youngest brother is a chemical engineer major, and when we get the reservoir engineers involved and all that, we all sit there together in a great meeting. And the next thing you know, me and Ruben will go grab lunch or something, and I'll be like, okay, what? And he can at least translate what the engineers really, really said if I had a question. And so that's what you guys are doing because, look, the legislation, they are talking legal mumbo jumbo left and right, and it's awesome. But what you and David are doing is just like breaking it down, talking about it, but also from the crude truth standpoint is that you're breaking it down and really just speaking the crude truth about what's going on and how this legislation is aiming for the future of this great state.
Well, it's a special place. I mean, I obviously work there at the Texas legislature, and so love it. The members and staff really do a phenomenal job for our state. 181 legislators down there, both in the House and Senate, that are representing parts of our state all over the state. And really, when you get down to it, there's not that many oil and gas professionals in the legislature. They're a part-time legislature, so there's lawyers and doctors and kind of everybody in between down there, but only a handful of oil and gas professionals. And so we really have to communicate. We have to go see lots of people. We have to go see both Republicans and Democrats and work with them to make sure that they understand some of the legislative proposals, how it would impact oil and gas, how it would impact consumers. And so we try to we try to keep them abreast of those challenges, and it's going to be a lot of fun with David over the next 120 days or so.
I know, man. That's a long time with David. Yeah. I'm just saying. Well, I got to ask you, and it may be not as hard of a question, but here we are. We're in the first quarter of 2023. Give me the crude truth on where you see Texas lining up for oil and gas in 2023, and maybe where you're kind of seeing in an elevator pitch on where you see oil and gas going this year.
Well, we are very excited to see record production back in Texas. It was just commenting on this that really in 2019, the start of 2020, we were breaking record production levels here in Texas from the 1970s. Just the critical need that those oil and natural gas resources have, not only for the United States but also around the world. And we were there. And then COVID and shutdowns and demand destruction. But we're nearly back. The Permian Basin is already setting record production levels. The Haynesville, as long as the Haynesville has been producing, is now back to record natural gas levels. Yes. We still need Barnett and the Eagle Ford to get back up and going, but Texas is going to set record production levels. At the same time, the industry has changed in the last several years. We're far more efficient. That's both a good and a bad thing. We have less employees out there. As I said, we track about 195,000 upstream employees in Texas. That used to be 350,000 at really its peak. And so that's a loss for sure. But at the same time, it's truly remarkable just to see the evolution and the efficiency gains in the Texas industry. I'm reminded that we used to have fresh water to do hydraulic fracturing, and how the ability to move to brackish and brine. And then ultimately, you've got companies that are using produced water now. That really, those efficiency gains have made West Texas certainly more resilient to have those freshwater resources. But that continued push, that investment, that innovation is just remarkable. And so it's like holding the tiger by the tail, trying to watch the new things that this industry is working and pioneering on. You've got some of the super majors right now focused here in Texas, trying to figure out, can we use hydrogen to power certain industries? Can we decarbonize certain industries like shipping and trucking? And then the prospects for carbon capture. We've been doing carbon dioxide floods in Texas for well over 50 years, as a way to enhance oil recovery and that tertiary recovery. But now, the environmentalists want to figure out a way that you can take carbon dioxide directly out of the air and put it down whole. And where are you going to get that expertise? It's not from that kid throwing tomato soup on a painting. It's from an oil and gas professional that's really figuring out how to make the world work and solve those big problems. And so it's, to give you the year, I mean, I have no idea, but it's going to be exciting and really a fun time.
First, you talk about, before I wrap up, you talk about, ways to carbon capture and things like that for environment friendly. I had a great meeting yesterday with, I think it's CTJ Energy, I think is what they're called, out of Fort Worth. And they have ways for flare stacks and stuff to capture things. So it was pretty cool to listen to that, because we're being very environmental friendly. And as I've said before, that's what oil and gas men and women are. We're conservationists. But what I just heard from you is that the crude truth is Texas is set for record-breaking years based on the great technology for us to become even more efficient. That's what I heard. That's what I heard.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I heard. I love it. Well, Jason, how can people get a hold of you, get a hold of the Texas Alliance Energy Producers, and become members and really enjoying the great fight that you guys are on? And please, let people know.
Well, come see us at texasalliance.org. We're very active on social media, Twitter and LinkedIn and YouTube. And all of my contact information is right there. So please reach out to us. We work just as hard for our individual member as we do for those very large companies. And so if we can be helpful to you at the Railroad Commission, in state government or in Washington, D.C., please let us know.
Well, Jason, I cannot thank you enough for this day, for coming up to Fort Worth, getting out of Austin, and venturing out. And I know this wasn't the only thing. You're here in town doing several things, several speaking engagements. And so thank you so much. Thank you for the compliments on our studio. Shout out to Real News Communications Network, one of the Crude Truth sponsors, but also provides us with a great little studio. We try not to do just a normal podcast.
They need a satellite in Austin so that I can take advantage. This is phenomenal. Well,
we're glad you like it. Maybe we'll have to get you at our Dallas studio next time. And we don't talk about Dallas too much. But no, I cannot thank you again enough. I guess that's about it on this episode. And thank you all for this episode. And we'll see you next time on The Crude Truth.
This episode of The Crude Truth is brought to you by Complete Solids Control, Oil and Gas Workers Association, Sandstone Group, Air Compressor Solutions, Basin Fluids and the Fuel Pros, and Real News Communication Network.
The easiest way to start your own podcast and TV show? Real News Communications Network. Stand out from your competition. Produce streams of high-quality social media content. Become a thought leader in your industry. With RNCN, you get to be the host. We handle everything else. Tour one of our 3 locations in Dallas, Fort Worth, and the Colony. Call 972-402-5787 6333 or visit launchashow.com to find out more.